How can Jimmy Kimmel live with him? Like, Jimmy Kimmel is a talented guy, and I don't think he's like an evil person or something, but he's made this deal where he just serves power and attacks anybody who challenges power. Like, how can, honestly, how can he look in the mirror and say, I'm doing something honorable?
You all know what they saw. They saw what we saw. They saw the frail elderly man who needed help getting off the stage. They're just too chicken shit to tell us about it, because they accurately deduce that he could still be the Democratic nominee, and they don't want to ding him up. Maybe you give Barbara a pass. Who gives a damn what this singer?
Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson just turned Jimmy Kimmel into a warning sign for comedians with oversized egos. This isn't a debate, it's a total takedown. Imagine a confident late-night host trying to outsmart two people who deal with media hypocrisy every single day. Spoiler alert, it doesn't go well for Jimmy. From his awkward jokes to his obvious virtue signaling, nothing is off limits. Get ready, because this roast hits even harder than Kimmel's ratings drop after another weak punchline.
Back in the day when I was on the primetime of Fox and you were on the primetime of CNN, a couple of hours after our shows ended, late night comics would come on, and they occasionally would make us laugh, Piers. As you know, they've abandoned that game now, and they're just political operatives out there.
Why sleep with him?
Well, it'd be
I mean
it'd be one thing. It'd be one thing if his job wasn't to be a comedian and to do that, but his job is to be he's supposed to be funny, and comedians are supposed to hold people in positions of power accountable.
Suck up
Yeah,
to the people in charge.
Exactly.
He's their Praetorian Guard.
Yeah,
and it's like the self-hatred he must feel, because he wasn't always that. That's my point.
Jimmy Kimmel, the guy who somehow went from hosting a wild, beer-chugging, over-the-top comedy show to acting like America's self-appointed moral authority. This is the same person who used to throw pies and joke about ridiculous stunts on TV. And now he sits behind his polished late-night desk, talking like he's some kind of wise philosopher with a punchline. Somewhere between those early days and his nightly lectures, Kimmel figured out that being self-righteous gets more attention than being silly. And he's leaned into it so much, it's like he's permanently stuck on that high horse.
How are you doing? If you watch the show regularly, I'm guessing you're not doing great.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare, for our climate. It was a terrible night for poor people.
If you're enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson didn't just roast him, they turned it into a full-on comedy intervention. Kimmel's whole career was laid out like one of his softer monologues, pulled apart, picked over, and gently pushed off stage with a laugh track. Because nothing says comedy gold like watching someone who once relied on edgy, questionable humor now act shocked anytime someone even hints at a non-woke opinion.
There are a lot of people who are like on your side because they're for free speech, who are not actually for free speech at all, who are pushing, a very specific foreign policy agenda, for example, and using another issue to lower your defenses and let themselves into your brain. And I think that's really sinister, really, really, really sinister. And it's becoming more obvious now. Like, if you're for free speech, then you're just for free speech because you support the principle. It doesn't, the content of the speech is not that interesting to you. The fact that a sovereign human being has the right to express himself because he's not a slave, he's a citizen and a human being, like, that's what matters.
Let's talk about Jimmy's new favorite hobby, getting emotional on cue. This guy tears up more than a daytime soap marathon. Someone rescues a dog, Jimmy's misty-eyed. Politics don't go his way, he's clearly shaken. A joke backfires on Twitter, total emotional spiral. At this point, he's had more tearful moments than a Nicholas Sparks movie during allergy season.
You know how much it costs to produce Jimmy Kimmel's show? I guarantee you it's tens and tens of millions. It could be as much as 100 million. I have no idea. You know how much Tucker's video cost? Nothing. You know how much Jimmy Kimmel, how many people he gets tuning in on an average night? Just last week, his average was, in the overall, meaning all viewers, 1.5 million. In the key demo, 236,000. Tucker would have been embarrassed to pull that on any night he was on the Fox News channel. That's what they're getting now. Tucker's numbers were 3 times what Jimmy Kimmel gets. And Tucker's little basement video that he did from clearly like his cabin that he broadcast out of Maine in literally has 21 million views.
He used to tell jokes. Now he just talks through his feelings like a moody teenager with a blog. Tucker didn't just laugh at Kimmel. He completely shut him down. Imagine trying to lecture people about decency when your comedy past includes over-the-top, questionable bits. The hypocrisy felt so thick you could spread it like frosty. It's like a former frat guy who spent years causing chaos during spring break suddenly demanding everyone follow strict rules or face backlash. Jimmy went from playful comedian to overly judgmental host faster than you can say ratings slump. And then there are the ratings. There was a time when Jimmy had a big audience. Now it feels more like a podcast with studio lights. The people still watching? Probably night owls, casual viewers flipping channels, or political interns grabbing clips for social media. The most interesting part of the show now is seeing which celebrity shows up and politely laughs at jokes that haven't landed in a long time. Megyn Kelly broke down his whole act just by holding up a mirror, one Jimmy doesn't seem too eager to face.
Federal employees are the core audience of CNN and MSNBC, so I don't think they're going to be. Yeah, of course they are.
Yeah.
Who's watching that crap?
Yeah.
What happens? I mean, right? That's a good. I mean, I'm not, obviously, but apparently people are. They're watching The View. What happens? They're watching Jimmy Kimmel or whatever his name is. What happens to all those people?
Yeah.
I mean, have they reached the point of like being so totally discredited that they can't continue?
Because in that reflection is a guy who traded comedy for applause, swapped punchlines for self-satisfaction, and replaced humor with the kind of tone you'd expect from an HR training video about email etiquette. She pointed out, pretty clearly, that Jimmy isn't even trying to be funny anymore. He's just trying to be right, and missing the mark on both. Let's not forget his political takes either. All talk, no real impact. Kimmel likes to present himself as a bold truth teller, standing up to power, while reading lines shaped by the same Hollywood circles he's always been part of. At times, it feels like he ends up undercutting himself. His comedic evolution is like watching something slowly wear down over time under constant pressure. And that's really the point. He used to be funny when jokes had a setup and a punchline, not a lecture and a hashtag. Now, his monologues land with all the energy of a routine lecture, more focused on messaging than making people laugh.
You got the Sunday morning show with Stephanopoulos into the evening Academy Awards broadcast with Kimmel, and ABC elevating, the blackface loving Kimmel. They, at the same time, fired Chris Harrison, host of The Bachelor, for trying to defend one contestant on, The Bachelorette for saying, gee, I know I went to this antebellum party, a couple years ago. I guess I didn't see anything wrong with it. And all he said was, are we judging her by today's standards, or are we judging her by, old standards, whatever. He was basically trying to say, are we being too hard on her? Got fired. Chris Harrison has to be fired by ABC. I don't know why, because he's not a committed leftist, because he's not out there more saying all the terrible things about Republicans that Jimmy Kimmel says. So this is them saying, we get it. We're an ally.
Kelly pointed out what she sees as the core issue with Jimmy's act. He's lost the thread. In her view, he's not really a comedian anymore, more like someone delivering lectures under the banner of late-night TV. The kind of tone that feels less like jokes and more like being talked at. Even his humor, critics say, can feel dated, like it hasn't evolved with the times. Watching Kimmel try to be edgy now, according to that perspective, can feel awkward and forced. And it raises a bigger question about what late-night television is supposed to be. Once built around broad comedy and light entertainment, some argue his show has shifted into something more opinion-driven, with long monologues and emotional segments replacing pure joke writing. From that angle, the laughter doesn't always feel spontaneous. It can come across more like polite audience participation than genuine reaction. And when a comedy show leans heavily into commentary, it naturally divides opinion about whether it's still comedy or something else entirely.
Machine that is irredeemable. And so maybe they'll continue to watch Jimmy Kimmel. That's like a separate issue, right? We have cultural issues in the country. But if we view the bureaucracy as its own target, separate and apart from the individuals who comprise it, I think that's going to, A, allow us to be more successful, and B, allow us to, I think, sell it to the rest of the country, and not in a fake sale, but like a true sale, to say that we don't hold this against the individuals.
At this point, he's not really telling jokes, he's presenting them like carefully packaged statements for approval. The punchline feels secondary, replaced by measured applause and polite reactions. And when he does attempt something edgy, it often lands softly, like it's been carefully sanded down before it ever reached the audience. It gives the impression that every episode is shaped by layers of caution and review, where nothing is left to chance. What used to feel like spontaneous late-night comedy now sometimes comes across more structured, more controlled. Kimmel's modern approach, from this perspective, can feel like he's aiming for a balance between comedy and commentary, but not always hitting the comedic side as strongly. The result is a show that leans heavily on monologue-driven segments in serious tones, with humor woven in more carefully than before. And the audience experience has shifted too. For some viewers, it's less about big laughs and more about listening to commentary wrapped in a late-night format. Whether that's a good or bad change depends on what people expect from late-night television, but it definitely isn't the same style it used to be.
Now, I will tell you, he's not the worst. The Daily Show has the worst ratings. They only have 366,000 people watching that show. During the Jon Stewart years, it was over 2 million. Now it's down to 300,000. Seth Meyers, absolutely dreadful. He doesn't even have 1 million, 778,000. I mean, for network television, this is, you don't have to pay for it. It's there when you turn on your TV, you plug it in. That's a dreadful number. Greg Gutfeld on cable, which you do have to pay for, it has more than double the numbers of Seth Meyers. Jimmy Kimmel, 1.5 million averaging, also equally horrible.
And then there's how he handles criticism. For someone in comedy, he doesn't always seem great at taking jokes himself. Even a light jab online can trigger a sharp response, as if every comment needs a reply. When critics like Megyn Kelly or Tucker Carlson target him, he tends to respond defensively, framing it as if it's something bigger than just comedy back and forth. From that angle, it stops feeling like playful banter and starts feeling more tense than it needs to be. There's also a perception that his work leans heavily into Hollywood circles and familiar viewpoints, which fuels the idea that he's not really challenging the system as much as reflecting it. Supporters see it differently, of course. They view him as someone speaking his mind in a polarized media environment, but critics argue that the bold voice image doesn't always match the material or the execution. In the end, it becomes a debate about what late-night comedy is supposed to be: pure entertainment, cultural commentary, or a mix of both, and whether he's still striking the right balance.
When I saw the dancing syringes, I was like, oof.
But you know all those. That's the weird thing, is you know all those guys, I assume, because you've lived in that world.
I know most of them, but it's easy to, and God bless them, and I hope that they can come around to become more independent in their thinking, because you can literally replace the dialogue, the jokes from one late night guy to the next guy, and then put them in the mouth of this guy, and it's just there's no individual point of view, because it is really ideologically captured and trapped. And I hope that they would realize that that's limiting. I would hope that you realize,
limiting, soul destroying.
Megyn Kelly criticized what she described as a kind of martyr narrative around Kimmel, where he presents himself as the one standing up against everything wrong. In that framing, he comes across less like a traditional comedian and more like someone delivering moral commentary through jokes. From that perspective, his humor isn't always seen as light or neutral. It's often interpreted as strongly opinionated, which can make disagreement feel more personal than comedic. Critics argue that this creates a tone where the jokes and the commentary can blend together. Supporters, on the other hand, see it as him using his platform to speak his mind in a polarized environment. They view that confidence as part of his style, not necessarily a flaw. Ultimately, it comes down to interpretation, whether he's a comedian pushing boundaries with opinion-based humor, or a host who leans more into commentary than traditional joke-telling.
Yes, hypocrisy is alive and well amongst these sanctimonious leftists. From Kimmel to De Niro to Stephanopoulos, they want you to believe they're better than you, more virtuous, more decent. But we all know the truth. They lie. They sin. They do the very things they accuse you of and the things they say they would never do. Evil things. Like try to destroy people based on feigned outrage.
He talks about kindness, but critics argue he often mocks people who don't share his views, especially when he frames it in a moral or superior tone. In that reading, the contradiction between message and delivery is what stands out most. In late-night TV comparisons, Fallon is often seen as more focused on light, playful interviews, and Colbert as someone who leans into sharper political humor and improvisation. Kimmel, in this critical view, is described as leaning more heavily on commentary-style monologues, where the tone can feel more like opinion than pure comedy. Some viewers feel his jokes don't always land with strong punchlines, instead blending into longer statements or reactions to current events. Others, however, appreciate that style as more topical and reflective of modern political humor. In the end, it comes down to what people expect from late-night comedy: quick laughs and entertainment, or a mix of humor and commentary shaped around current issues.
Just for hate speech, for jokes.
And you're not allowed on late night TV either.
I don't get invited to
Do you
places.
care?
No, why would I? I mean, like, it's not, I mean, as I said, it got on Twitter and then Fox News, of course, which I said, much late night TV is just political indoctrination with comedic imposition.
Yeah.
It's just, and it no longer resembles comedy as much as, cheering on the rhetoric and, attacking a particular one half of the country.
And then there's his laugh. Critics describe it as overly forced, the kind that stands out more than it lands, like he's reacting to his own material before the audience has a chance to respond. At times, it can feel less like natural humor and more like part of the performance itself. From that angle, it adds to the perception that the show is tightly controlled, with scripted beats and carefully structured monologues shaping the tone. The humor becomes less about spontaneous reaction and more about delivery within a set format. Some critics also argue that his comedy operates within a fairly insulated environment, where the perspective rarely shifts outside familiar cultural and political viewpoints. Supporters, though, would say that's simply his voice in the audience he's speaking to. When figures like Megyn Kelly or Tucker Carlson criticize him, it tends to intensify that divide between those who see him as a mainstream political commentator in comedy form and those who still view him as a traditional late-night entertainer.
Just this past 2 weeks, they had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored? At the Kennedy Center. You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the Academy Awards in full blackface?
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Crystal. Billy Crystal. And do you know who's going to be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken inner city sort of urban accent saying she needs to darn those socks? Jimmy Kimmel as Oprah, as a fat...
He's not a late-night host in the traditional sense, critics argue, but more of a sign of how comedy has changed over time. In their view, punchlines have increasingly been mixed with political commentary, and humor often sits alongside opinion-driven monologues aimed at engagement rather than pure laughs. From that perspective, his show reflects a broader shift in late-night television, where entertainment and commentary overlap more than they used to. Some viewers see that as relevant and modern, while others feel it moves away from what made the format popular in the first place. Figures like Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson are often brought into the discussion because they represent the opposite side of that cultural divide, highlighting how differently people interpret the same material. In the end, the reaction to Kimmel says as much about today's media landscape as it does about him, what counts as comedy, what counts as commentary, and where people draw the line between the two.